Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. We have Chris J Snook with us today. Chris is many things: serial technology investor and entrepreneur, is a global business and investment strategist, the co-host of the Web3 Show on FinTech TV. Is the international best-selling author, co-author that is with Travis Wright of Digital Sense. He's a founder, managing partner at Atomic, Virtual Family Office, and I could keep on going. But Chris, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks. I'm excited to meet you. Actually, I'm very impressed by your background, and we just met. So you are doing what you say. You're an executor, and we went from inbox to interview in about 12 hours. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great system, the podcasting system. You decided to launch your own podcast. Why was that, and what was the thesis behind it?
Well, I'm constantly updating and iterating as that goes related to the content side of things. I've had the opportunity to do some form of that multiple times over the last decade and a half. Travis and I had a show on FinTech TV for a while called the Web3 Show, and the current version, which is in a launch phase for late fall, is called the Atomic Level, and it's there primarily to kind of take things that I'm focused on now and what the business is focused on now, and really just extend that conversation, much like you are right now, to the audiences that we care about moving forward, which are small business owners, retail investors, and people that at some point want to have their money outlive them and pass down some form of generational stewardship or wealth to their heirs. And so we've got the new book coming out called The Rockefeller Method Rewired on October 28th, and dropping chapters each week on the Substack at wealthmatterstome.com. For any of the premium subscribers, you can get a bunch of great value and insights there as well for free. But that's kind of why. Is just it's the next iteration of the platform that we look to spread our message and to like minds.
And what's your background? How did you get started in life and then in business?
I come from a wonderful family upbringing, but it was not an entrepreneurial one. It was My father was a teacher. My mom was kind of what would have been a gig economist, meaning like if platforms that existed today existed in the 70s and 80s, she would have probably been on them. But for the most part, she was a stay-at-home mom. But she always contributed. She always had her hands in a bunch of things, whether it was cleaning houses or helping opening up a retail craft store in New Jersey. And so I kind of saw them both just always prioritizing the family first. We didn't come from money, and neither one of them came from money. So it wasn't a conversation we had. We didn't really talk a lot about money. We didn't talk about what was bad about it, meaning I don't recall ever hearing too many arguments over not having enough. And at the same time, we certainly didn't talk about investments or things like that at the kitchen table. We talked about sports or baseball or church or something like that. And so, for what that's worth, I kind of didn't know that I had the entrepreneurial gene, if you will, until basically I graduated college. And when I went to college, I chose primarily to go to college because I wanted to continue to play sports. And I was recruited for both baseball and football, but I loved football. There was something about it that I just loved more. And so I went because that was the opportunity to continue to play. And like everybody, at one point you have dreams of, well, maybe I could go pro someday. I never was delusional, though, that was going to last forever, because I knew, well, my father embedded it in me. No matter how good you are, even if you make it, your career is going to be over before you're 30, most statistically. So you better find something that you're passionate about and that you can do for the rest of your life, because otherwise, sports, your body's going to wear out before you die, right? If you're living a normal average life. And so I had a lot of energy, I had a lot of passion, a lot of focus that I'd put into basically becoming the best athlete that I could. And I knew when that ended, I needed to replace it with something, but I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know what would consume me that much. And I kind of just serendipitously stumbled upon the world of personal development, and that led me to business, meaning like there was no YouTube back in 1998, right? None of those things existed. And so there was Barnes and Noble and there was Borders bookstore. And I went and I picked up a book for pleasure for the first time ever. It was called Think and Grow Rich. It took me forever to read because outside of college, I had never read anything I wasn't prescribed to on a syllabus. And yet it like started to make me think different, and it opened up a world of possibility. So I just kept consuming more and more. And then I'm very practical and pragmatic. So I learn by doing. And so naturally, then I was like, well, maybe I should try and invest in real estate, or I should try and start a business, or I should try and do this. And then next thing you know, in 1999, I'm an entrepreneur when it isn't a thing. I'm in grad school trying to figure out, how to get my career and income to a level where I could have a family and do the things. My ambitions were not crazy. They were just like to be happy, like a lot of people, and hopefully get married and have some kids someday. As time unfolded, the entrepreneurial DNA got turned on, I guess. And then I found myself $500,000 in debt because I didn't know what I was doing. And I got good at enrolling people, but I was really poor at vetting the deal, understanding whether it was going to ever work or not. I, was taught to work hard. I was modeled that. So, the strengths and liabilities come in because you don't necessarily know when to cut your losses. So I went, 2 or 3 years in the wrong direction. And then in the early double O's, I found myself, essentially $500,000 in debt, no income, and no job. And no one would hire me because I didn't really even know how to get a job at that point. Certainly no job that was going to pay back $500,000 in debt. So at that point I was kind of like I had to figure it out. There was only one way out, which was through. And, the rest is history, as they say it. I mean, I don't know that it was a conscious choice. I think I unlocked the DNA of a builder and an entrepreneur. And then I just played football with my, career, which was basically I ran into stuff full speed, and sometimes it knocked me out and sometimes I knocked it out. And 25 years later, we've learned some things along the way.
Interesting. And when did you actually get out of that $500,000, and how?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. I've done interviews over the years on this. So anybody that's really curious, there's a lot of, deeper dives on it. But the short version is it took me a couple years. Basically by 2004, I was on my way out of it. I got exposed into a bunch of different industries because when you're hyper pragmatic and you have the pain of being, basically functionally bankrupt, then you just you get real quick. You learn, I better look where the money is flowing, right? Capital is always moving somewhere. So I was kind of like, well, I'm not going to sell broken glass in a bag, meaning like I come from an upbringing that, really put the right lens of morality on my DNA code so that, I could leave money on the table, even if it was a lot of money, because I wanted to be able to sleep at night, or I wanted to be able to live with myself. And I also, at the same time had this kind of hustle mentality, and nothing is given, everything is earned. And from the East Coast kind of upbringing. And so, the point is I just got into a bunch of different industries, and I bounced in and out of them, making checks to kind of chip my way out of that. And it took me a couple of years. And then I got married in 05. And about April of 05, I got back to even, flipped a property that I had bought a year earlier. And that kind of took out the rest of the debt and gave me some money to invest. And then, had a couple good years, and then got wiped out again in 08, not because of the great financial crisis, but literally like right in front of it. Not that they were totally unrelated, but it wasn't like because of it. I came out of my hell in that scenario 7 days before Lehman Brothers went in. And so I kind of then spent 09 and 2010 realizing that the world didn't end when I did go bankrupt that time. $2.7 million, I think, was the total. And so 09, 010, I started to rebuild again, invested in a couple companies. That was when I made the conscious shift to really focus on software and technology, because at that time, for those who remember, that was like software is going to eat the world. And I was like, okay, well, I need to be somewhere where the trend line is upward and to the right and like going to last a decade or so. I don't want to basically be in the wrong product or in the wrong industry. So I'm a good learner. I'm hyper curious. And that's kind of when I went full time into technology. I'd never been really into technology before that. And then had a couple wins and losses in that realm. 2013 was able to take kind of like 2 years off and had enough money to basically hang myself, but could kind of figure out what I wanted to do next. And I did startup weeks in Northern Colorado and basically just gave away all my time and energy and networks. And I built these great networks of service, helping other entrepreneurs basically just connect to each other, connect to capital, connect to their community in Fort Collins, Colorado. And through that, I kind of turned on this gene of events and platforms and content and really just understood how to build meaningful relationships and networks at scale. And that I had a love for it. Like I love doing events. I just wasn't making any money because they were all designed to be basically nonprofit or like break even. So after 2 years of that, I was like, well, I got to make some money again. And at that point, I had enough relationships where I was able to get invited to basically join a team and help turn around a digital agency in Arizona. And then I went to Arizona, did that for a year. We sold that company a year later and successfully turned it around. And then one of my investments in 2010 sold in 2017. And that kind of bought us a house. And so we did that for 8 years. And then I wrote the books and then I started another company, and we went from $0 to $50 million in pre-sales in the pre-launch, and we were going to launch it at the World's Fair. And then as we were landing in Dubai to launch it at the World's Fair, I found out that a partner had committed fraud against the public markets with one of our investors and also us. And I had to shut the whole thing down, and I lost probably $15 million in income and spent a year and a half licking my wounds and trying to understand how I didn't see it coming. And that was a painful one in 21 through 22. And so, the short version is, no one gets out of this game without bruises and dings and cuts. And, you don't make it your goal. And success, is evolved over the years. It's never really moved far from its core. My first memory of a goal that I set in like 1999 was not a financial one, even though there were financial goals. But it is one that I'm most proud of, and it is one that I have achieved, which is kind of interesting because it's like it was this weird thing that I thought. And what that thought was I wanted to basically be able to be invited to any conversation in any room, any boardroom, any religion, any geopolitical environment, anything where the people that matter, where the powerful people in that room were there. And I wanted to be able to add value to the conversation. No matter what I did, I wanted, whether it was one word, whether it was a paragraph, I wanted to be able to add value to the people in that room. That was my goal. And I knew I wasn't able to do that in 1999. So that's why it was such an important goal. Because I was like, if I sat in a room right now, I don't know anything. So it was kind of the number one goal 25 years ago. And what saved me, to this day, what has saved me through every one of the, fits and starts, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, like, has been the fact that I think if you ask most people that know me, I would add value to the conversation. And I think that uniformly kind of is the impression that I've been able to leave with people. And so now, success to me is doing it with who I want, and also really now going to the next level where I can kind of not think it's me, right? That I'm just the steward of this talent, this energy, and whatever these gifts are and aren't, and to try and basically honor that with service, and that's kind of where we are today. So it's been an evolution.
Right. Great story. Great lessons there. How did you not get PTSD from all these wounds that you had? How did you recuperate from these big shots, these big kidney shots that have been sent your way over the past couple of decades? And how do you manage your stress also before you recover, right? Like, how do you manage the stress during these situations?
I've done hundreds of interviews. That's probably one of the best questions anybody's ever asked me. So kudos to you for asking that. I don't think I did avoid it. I think I have it. I know I have it, meaning the PTSD. Like, there's no question. I think, my father, and you'll hear me say, I've already said it once, I think. I say this more and more. My father always had this thing that he would say to me, like, your greatest strengths can often be your greatest liabilities. And an entrepreneur's greatest strength, I know mine is, I know any entrepreneur that's been successful, is that they can kind of just keep getting up, right? Like, they can have a boot on their throat, they can have their hands tied behind their back, they can have a bloody lip, they can have their knees broken, and somehow they will kind of get up and get the next milestone, or they will do it. Now, sadly, we've seen an uptick more recently in the last decade or so of people that don't, of people that end their life, for any number of reasons. And a lot of times people that have made it, right, where they have the stuff, or they have the exit, or they have, and then you find out that there was something that they didn't tell anybody, and they've ended their life. And so, PTSD in that world, in no way do I want to talk about it in the same way that I would relate to a soldier at war, because I've never been in war. I don't want to be in war. I think what happens to human beings in war is different fundamentally, but that doesn't mean that PTSD does not exist in the entrepreneurial world or in other places, right? Because we know it does. And I think because it's not war in that way, entrepreneurs will diminish it. We'll talk ourselves out of it. We'll say, "No, I'm not depressed, right? I'm just tired," or "I'm not this. I'm just stressed," or I just got to. And what I've learned, even as recently as a couple weeks ago, is that there is a toll. Much like there was a toll for playing football. Like, make no mistake, I loved playing American football. I don't want my kid to play it. And thankfully, he's not interested in playing it. Now, if he was interested in playing it, I would try and support him and get out of my own way, but I'd have concerns, right? But I loved it. Like, I don't regret playing football, but I also am 49 going on 50 in October, and I got a hip replacement 2 years ago. My first and only ever surgery, but I have a titanium hip at age 47. And a lot of that is because of the choices I made to throw my body into other human beings for years at high speed, right? So there is a toll of being an entrepreneur. And one of those things is this post-traumatic stress syndrome, because you question everything. And then the problem is that they say it's lonely at the top. Well, it's lonely at the top and the bottom sometimes as an entrepreneur, because when you're at the bottom, you don't feel like you can talk to anybody, because they either work for you, they've invested in you, they're being led by you, right? And then, so where do you go? And so a lot of times you find yourself with other entrepreneurs, and you're sharing war stories, or you're leaning on them, and that's important, because everything is built around this aura that you have the answer, and you're not trying to put that mantle down. You're happy to hold that responsibility. That's what being an entrepreneur. That's why you get paid the big bucks. That's why it is worth more than someone who doesn't take that risk, as far as I'm concerned, right? There's a meritocracy to it. However, where do you go? And then the further and older you get, the more layers in, because now it's not just you in your 20s, trying to bang out, willing to eat ramen noodle and all the bugs that are in it, right? Now there's kids, now there's a wife, now there's your own, energy levels and worries about stress and health and being around and all those things, right? And so as it layers on, I want to say it gets harder, because that's, in some ways it gets easier because you get more mature about it and you have less to prove. But if you're not willing to admit your constraints, then yeah, it's not a good place. So I
Right.
think,
Very, very
I think
good
it
answer.
starts with just admitting that we can only do so much, and that at some point, all of us have to be carried. Now, again, I'll take another question because maybe that'll go in a different direction. But
Yeah, yeah, no issues. No, I think to your point, even friends and family, they don't understand their situation because yeah, we've created a monster, but also like a superhero, right? Like we're very exceptional as CEOs and founders at the top, right? Like at the very high performance level. So we've created a set of skill and a persona that very few people will understand ever. And even your family, your kids, your wife, while you're protecting them, right? So sometimes just like, yeah, better I just won't tell them because it's for their own good, right? Like that they'll just feel better about it. I mean, I tell my wife a bunch of things, but sometimes just like, yeah, she had a hard day. Like, I'm just not gonna put that on her. So yeah, very lonely. Even on podcasts or masterminds like this one, for example. Yeah, people take some time to open up, right? To win your trust. So it's kind of tricky when to what to share and what not to share, right? And sometimes as men, I feel yeah, we just think we're being sissies sometimes. And guess what? I think sometimes we're right. Like it's not about like pouring your heart out pretty much all the time like the new age man, but I think it's yeah, it's being stoic and carrying a burden on your back and feeling the pain. Sometimes pain is good, like a bunch of people they avoid pain at all costs. What is your philosophy regarding that? Do you still also practice sport and have a nice little cozy spot for pain in your life?
I do and don't. Another great question. We kind of. I'm just gonna my opinion. It may show my generational age, right? Um, I come from the last generation of adults that remembers graduating undergraduate without an email address, without a cell phone, without a computer. A year later, I went into grad school and I had all three. Now, the cell phone at that time in 1999 was for emergencies only, and it was in the glove box of my car. Um, but my point is that because I remember an analog world. Now, it's funny because when I think back about how I connected with friends or how I met with whoever, right? Like I go, how did we actually do that? Because like we just had to show up like when we said we would. Because if we got lost, there was no way to tell one another. You can't call payphone from a payphone type of thing. Um, but it works somehow, and there's like there's a beauty to that, right? But it's not the reality we live in today, and we're never going back. So my point is that I come from a generation where everybody from their own perspective is right, and from my perspective, I think we had tough love. We had, first place was first place, and there was nothing else. I mean, I remember very specifically Pop Warner football. Our team was terrible, and I don't remember our record. We might have won one game. I don't remember. We were horrible, and I remember going to the banquet, and there was like 16 teams in the league, and we were like number 15 or 16. I don't think we were last place, but we are like 15 or 16, and the food gets served. And like Trenton, which was number one, they won everything. They blew everybody out, right? Trenton's like walking across and like getting all their food, and 30, 40 minutes goes by. Now you're a 14, 15-year-old kid, like, and as a man, all you want to do is eat, right? And there's a buffet of food, right? And I remember, it felt like it was a day. I mean, we were sitting in the back just watching every single other team get up and eat. And we sucked. And so we ate last, right? And why I say that is because like there was something good about that. There was something healthy about that. I still remember it to this day. I remember going, no freaking way am I coming in last place again, because I'm not eating last. And like, so it shapes you, right? In a way where if everybody gets the same reward at the end, it doesn't shape you, right? Now, there's negatives to that too. But I say all that because pain is relative. Entrepreneurs typically have a higher pain tolerance than most people. Football players definitely have a higher pain tolerance than normal people that don't play football. Extreme athletes have a higher risk tolerance than most people, right? We all wonder at them, we like watch them do the flips on the skis or on the snowboard or on whatever. We're like, ho, ho, ho. And then we're like, I don't want my kid doing that. because we don't want our son or daughter to get hurt or injured, right? But we love watching it. It's what makes being a human so cool, is to watch other humans do things we can't understand. And so we're mostly spectators in life, and we all have different levels of pain. There's people who survive cancer, and I'm like, wow. There's people who survive children being dead, for reasons that make no sense, and somehow they survive as a parent. And I'm like in awe of that, because I can't imagine that pain. And I don't ever want to, right? And so I think pain is relative, and we all deal with it, and we're surprisingly more resilient than we think in general. But sometimes we don't apply it across every aspect of our life, right? Certain things in relationships break certain people much easier than they would break you or me. Certain things in business or money break people more easily than they would break you or me, and vice versa. So we kind of just have to do a rapid honesty assessment of where we're weak and where we're strong. Like, where do we have a high pain tolerance, and where are we, to use your word, a little bit of a sissy? Not for any other reason than to just recognize where we're vulnerable, right? Maybe there's nothing we can do to change it. Maybe there's nothing we want to do to change it. But at least we recognize where we are that way. And then the other side of that coin is, just because you have a high pain tolerance does not mean that it always serves you. And again, to be very, very real time, very personal, I had an epiphany. As funny as that may sound, 25 years into this, I've done nothing but build businesses, invest in them for 25 years, right? I've never had a check from anybody else for longer than 90 days in my life. And so, when I think about my own pain tolerance, it has also been what's held me back. Like, if I look at what I'm capable of and versus my outputs, my actual rewards, it's not just humility when I go, well, what am I most proud of? It's also just, is that worth saying? That's kind of small in today's comparison of, billionaires here and da, 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 da. And it's not because I'm not capable of those things. I know it. It's because there's something I have not been willing to do, consciously or unconsciously, to unleash that aspect of me. And so being willing and able are two different things, right? If you can see it, if you can visualize it, if you can recognize it in somebody else, you're able to do it. Whether or not it's moral, whether or not it's ethical, whether or not it's legal, if you recognize it in someone else, you're able of that. Whether you're willing or not is whether it happens. So if you're not willing to break the law to get to a certain end game, then you're able to break the law. Like, you're consciously aware that other people do it, but you're not willing to do it, so you won't do it. If it's legal, but it's not ethical, and you're able to understand the difference, but you're not willing to be unethical to get the end result because of whatever consequence you think that's going to yield internally, even if no one else knew, then you don't have to worry about being unethical, because you won't physically allow yourself to sell that thing, do that thing, what have you. If you're not sure, that's where the inner conflict comes in. And so I think algorithmically, the challenge we all face, regardless of our generation, is for the last 15 years, we have been algorithmically programmed to think we're thinking, and really all we're doing is reacting. And because of that, it's harder and harder for humans to design or to decide whether or not this is something I'm able or willing to do, and whether or not I can live with it, because we've created this Pavlovian response through the feeds and the socials and the likes and the shares and the dopamine hits of validation that has skewed our thinking. And then what we think is painful is not really that painful. And what we accept as tolerable ultimately becomes very painful inside when we have to go to sleep and it's just us. And that is why you see suicide rates higher. That is why you see depression at all-time highs. That is why you see that, because we are being manipulated cognitively in a way that human beings were not designed to be manipulated. And now we've taken this thing called entrepreneurship, which is beautiful. Build something from nothing, right? Do more for others than you do for yourself. That's what being an entrepreneur does. You provide value and service to something bigger than yourself, and you reap the rewards for it after the sacrifice, after you've, that's a beautiful thing. The problem is it's not glamorous. It's meaningful, but it's never been designed to be glamorous, yet we've glamorized it. So we have this whole status quo now. of the private jets and of the thing that kind of glamorized the lifestyle of being an entrepreneur. And the reality is it's a painful lifestyle. It has high rewards. Just like when you make a sack and you knock somebody down in the stadium of 90,000 people and everyone jumps to their feet and you get this adrenaline rush like nothing on the planet because you're being energized. But then you go home with a concussion. So you understand the trade. And I think, unfortunately, we are now starting to recognize this, and podcasts are helping, and things like the conversations are helping. But we've got to collectively, as a society, get back to valuing the right stuff.
Much agree with everything that you said, Chris. Yeah, let's do a round 2 next year. Where can people find out more about you and your company?
The best place to start is I'd love for you to read the newsletter. Again, it's free. Give it an email. Click through the no thanks if you want. You can be a premium subscriber and get some other things. You can read about that. But wealthmatterstome.com is a great place to kind of connect. You can link to the other sites from there, including my personal one or including that. But wealthmatterstome.com is kind of the focus right now, is where I'm trying to, have the most conversations.
That was Chris and Charles for another